I want to move the latter part of this conversation into supply chains. So as we do so, Miles, would you mind posting our last poll question to the audience? Folks, we want to know, in the past 12 months, has your organization actively requalified or added any new suppliers due to economic or geopolitical shifts in policy changes? So we'll leave that up for you to answer. Again, I encourage you to submit some questions to our panelists through the Q&A box. Speaking of, Jon, I saw a great question come through that I think you're well suited to answer here, being at a unique company such as Vaxart, which is from Paul, asks, how does the panel feel about the reduced supply chain need if an oral vaccine goes to market? And for those of you out there who are not familiar with Vaxart, they are working in the oral vaccine space. So Jon, let's put you in the hot seat and hear your thoughts on that.
I mean, it's to be seen, right? We're still working through, phase 1, phase 2 clinical trials. So what our supply chain need to some extent hasn't fully presented itself.
Gotcha. James and Adam, any thoughts there if we wanted to pontificate on the impact or effect of oral vaccines on supply?
I mean, coming from a vaccines background, it's again, it's about that innovation, right? Kind of keeping your options open, being ready to adapt, and making sure that you're challenging yourselves to innovate and really adapt to the market demands.
Good point, Adam. James?
I'm simply not qualified to answer this question. I leave it to those two resident experts that know much more than I do.
Fair enough. So everybody, I want to know what your advice is to folks on we're going to pull on the supply chain thread. What is your advice to people in our audience who are currently sourcing materials and equipment? What mistakes should they avoid in your experience? And what should be their frame of mind when they're exploring sourcing solutions? James, you're large in charge on my screen right now, so why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I think what I would advocate for, especially for small companies, if you can afford it, go visit on site. Because of the pandemic, Zoom inspections have become very common, and that's just not the way to do it. Go on site. I would encourage management to go with your manufacturing people as well, to ask those very naive questions on costs and things of that sort. It's okay for someone to be the bad cop when you're visiting these manufacturing facilities, but try to get there in person. That's at least my advice when you're looking for new sources.
A Zoom inspection is crazy. Can't even. So I believe it though. I do believe it happens, but yeah, I would say on site's always better for sure. I used an analogy the other day of picking a vendor without going on site is kind of like buying a house that you've only seen pictures of on Zillow. You got to get in there, got to test the joists for yourself. Adam, Jon, any advice there in terms of sourcing solutions and how companies big and small should be approaching it?
Yeah, I mentioned some of it earlier. Sorry, Jon. Standardized solutions, avoid custom, find things that you can multi-source as much as possible. I completely agree with James with going to see the manufacturing site in person. Nothing really truly beats that, because then you really get a sense of what is going on and if the solution truly fits your needs.
Thanks, Adam. Jon?
I certainly agree with James and Tyler and everyone. Eyes on the process and eyes on manufacturing, and to some extent eyes on all of your suppliers is worth the investment. It's worth the trips, and it's, I think, worth it for your quality departments to be fully on board and well up to speed on what all of your suppliers are doing for you.
Yeah, great points, everyone. I think there's a pretty solid through line there of just holding them accountable and being there for yourself to get people on the ground to see that. Miles, would you mind showing us the results of this poll We asked you in the past 12 months if your organization has actively requalified or added new suppliers. And it looks like a quarter of people have multiple suppliers or are planning to. 16.7% said not at all. 33% said one or two. How does that strike everybody? You surprised at all by that? Do you think it's about par for the course there?
I think for me, I think it's something that, it's clear the lesson's been received, right? We're a couple of years out of the pandemic now, and there's been some time to adapt to that. So the results aren't that surprising because it indicates that there's people who are aware, in process, or almost there of multiple suppliers.
Yeah. Thanks, Adam.
I agree.
We had an audience question come through from Miriam before. It was asking essentially, how can we entice manufacturers to produce here domestically in the United States at a reasonable price, like to compete with API providers in Asia? Are there any thoughts on that? Adam, you're on my screen right now. What would you say to Miriam? I don't know if you saw that question come through.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm the right person to answer that question, Tyler, as I'm based in Canada, so my reality is a little different than yours or the rest of the panels. So maybe I'll let them go first, and if I have anything to add on to, I'll jump in.
Fair enough.
The only thing I'll say, Tyler, and it goes back to too many years of this industry. When you look at starting materials for API, there's some pretty strict environmental laws in the United States, and hence that's why there's certain starting materials you cannot manufacture in the United States, and countries like India and China make it a whole lot easier to get those starting materials out the door. And that's a problem. I mean, not a problem. I mean, we should have strong environmental concerns, but going back to what Adam said, I think we need to innovate. I mean, we need to figure this out. I don't think you can just wave a magic wand and say, okay, let's cut costs because really many of the starting materials aren't found here. And now you're looking at gene therapy or cell therapy where the starting material are humans, right? So there's a cost to that. How do you decrease that cost? We're working on it. You need scale. And until you have scale, those costs aren't going to come down.
Yeah. Thank you, James. Jon?
I mean, we're not impacted by ex-US API suppliers, but we are seeing the analogy in other raw materials, as I think James was alluding to. There are a few places where you are sort of to some extent stuck with a supplier. And I think it forces innovation to some extent, and it definitely supports very strong supplier agreements with them.
Yeah, fair points. Jon, I did want to talk specifically with you. I know we spoke about the knock-on effects, and we kind of alluded to this earlier in equipment quality and availability, but what knock-on effects should operations leaders be aware of when it comes to equipment quality? During times of economic turbulence, how do costs and availability of materials affect equipment? And I know you spoke to this a little bit before, but what can people be aware of that they might not think, based on your experience?
From our experience, I would say look beyond just your scientific and manufacturing and development equipment in terms of where you think impacts might be felt further down the road. We felt some of our largest impacts actually through environmental controls, and specifically HVAC, and anything that we bought in 2020, 2021, we have had a high proportion of maintenance costs go into that equipment that we did not plan for.
Really? Maintenance? Do you think it just came not as robust as it should have been? And do you think there was kind of a quality control mismanagement there, maybe on account of the pandemic, or what?
I think it was just sort of to some extent, some equipment and again, I guess for us, weirdly, HVAC was maybe not made to the same standard that it was pre-pandemic. Anything that we've gotten more recently has been a little bit more predictable. But there was a period of a couple of years where I think during the pandemic, when equipment manufacturers were still being asked to manufacture equipment, and to some extent, maybe at elevated rates as companies try to respond to new environmental controls. But yeah, we did not expect the impact to the quality of that equipment that we were buying, and I think it was just, for lack of a better term, the time at which it was made.
Yeah. And I mean, forgive me if this is naive here, but what do you think is a bigger concern broadly? Is it availability and cost of materials that presents the bigger challenge to operations, or is it this quality of equipment as you described, and costs associated with that, with repair and everything like that? And then I want to go around the horn and hear everyone else's.
Oh, I mean, I'll continue. I think for us, long term, it is raw materials more than equipment. I mean, equipment you can deal with, and if if purchases didn't work out in your favor, it's unfortunate, but there's a certain cost you have to eat, and you can move on, and hopefully that's one time, whereas raw material availability will be persistent.
Yeah. Thanks, John. James, anything to add there? Adam?
I agree. I think if your organization has terrific manufacturing people, they will figure out a way to adapt with the equipment they have, or dice and splice it. But it's material supply. It's tough because you're competing. If a new company comes along that needs some similar starting material and they have more money, then you're back in the back of the line of the calendar. So small companies get bumped a lot. So it's I agree with John completely.
Thanks, James. Adam?
Yeah, I completely agree as well. Both are a challenge, but not having materials at the end of the day means you're not able to produce, right? You can adapt to equipment challenges in many different ways that you can't adapt to material challenges in the same way.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Sounds like everybody agrees. You can't do much without, you can have all the equipment in the world, but if you don't have the raw materials, you're kind of just sitting there twiddling your thumbs, right? Well, we are getting short on time here, but I did just want to go around the horn one final time and really just distill today's conversation. We're in 2026. A lot is happening, as we've just been discussing for an hour. But if we're putting on our prediction hats and we're looking forward to the next year, what do you think the sector should be prepared for, and what would your single concrete piece of advice be to our audience today? Adam, you're on my screen. Let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to look ahead, given all the change that we've seen in the past few years, to say definitively, this is where we'll land. I think what it comes down to ultimately is expecting the unexpected and be ready that change will happen. So building that agility, that resilience, looking to innovate, all the points that I've touched on through the conversation, and really approaching everything with that mindset, so that when something happens or something changes that you're not expecting, you can pivot and you can adapt to that.
Thank you, Adam. John?
No, I agree with Adam. The unexpected has become de rigueur. It's, as he said, do your best to adapt. Recognize that that can come at any time. Don't rest on your laurels for long at all, as you never know what might change, and to some extent that's still playing out. I think we will hopefully find a source of stability that's far more stable than where we're at now, but I do think, in agreement with my other panelists, it's still going to take some time to present itself.
Thank you, John. Yeah, don't get comfortable, right? James?
So let me end with some optimism. So I have two kids. I have 4 kids, but I got 2 of them in the industry. One's at a large pharma. The other one's that works for CDMO, ironically, in cell therapy. They ask me very much the same type of things. I keep telling them this too shall pass. I'm old enough to remember the first Clinton administration where Hillary Clinton was going to be in charge of the healthcare markets, and they actually deregulated the PBMs at that time. So that caused a disaster, and it's the disaster we're still living with, 30 something years later. But the pharmaceutical companies got hammered in the early 90s, mid 90s. And we had to figure that out. It was a disaster. And that's really what helped grow the biotech industry at that point. And then you saw in the year 2000, biotech boom stopped, and then it grew back. And so everything's very cyclical. Hopefully the cycle isn't very long, but I think once the rhetoric dies down a little bit and we'll be able to stabilize again. I agree with my colleagues. Innovation is number one. We have to keep doing that. We have to keep recruiting really good people into the industry and not let we're the enemy right now. I'm not sure, how we're the enemy when we help extend people's lives. We buy people time. I don't understand how we're the enemy, but we are. So we have to get ourselves out of that and move forward. And I think we will.
Yeah. Ever the optimist, James. Thank you. I appreciate it. James, Jon, Adam, thank you all so much for being here to share your thoughts and opinions on protecting bioprocessing operations and supply chains during times of economic distress. To those of you in the audience, thank you so much for joining us live. And once again, I'd like to thank our sponsor for today's event, Thermo Fisher Scientific. This is Bioprocess Online Live. See you next time. Oh, hi. Didn't see you there. I'm Tyler Menichello, Chief Editor of Bioprocess Online, and thank you for watching. If you like that, you're going to love all the other content we have for you at Bioprocess Online. From archived live events to long-form videos, short-form videos, podcasts, expert contributed guest columns, newsletters, editorial from me, it's all over there at Bioprocess Online, just waiting for you to dig in. So if that sounds like your cup of tea, head on over to bioprocessonline.com, and I'll see you there.